Lisa Johnson is a high conflict divorce strategist who co founded Been There, Got Out with her partner, Chris. She's a divorce coach and a certified domestic violence advocate who has successfully represented herself through scores of court appearances. Her case has been published in the Connecticut Law Journal and is being used as legal precedent. Her live testimony helped pass Jennifer's Law in Connecticut, the third state in America to expand its legal definition of domestic violence to include coercive control. Lisa and Chris coach people in high conflict relationships, divorce, custody battles, and co parenting hell so they can have the chance of the best outcome in family court and beyond. Their book, Been There, Got Out: Toxic Relationships, High Conflict Divorce, and How to Stay Sane Under Insane Circumstances, is an amazing resource to help you understand that battle you're up against when you're divorcing a high conflict ex. Lisa, welcome.
Thank you, Tracy. It's so good to be with you again.
I know it's so fun to have you here as a repeat guest because every time you are on, I learn something new about how to manage these high conflict relationships and, more importantly, high conflict divorces, which I think that unfortunately women become the victim of more often.
Well, I mean, legal abuse is our specialty, and it's people weaponizing the legal system to wear an X down and bleed them dry. And financially, women are definitely more targets of financial abuse because they often are not the moneyed spouse. Although we do know several who are the moneyed spouse and are very angry at having to pay alimony and child support.
Yes, certainly. There's not an always or a never in these situations, but the statistics still bear out that women more often are the lower earners, have often given up careers or scaled back their careers for the good of the family. And then when divorce comes, they're in a really precarious financial position. And unfortunately, there are lots of soon to be ex husbands who take advantage of that and just try to, as your book says, bleed them dry.
Right. And I think one of the things that the moneyed spouse, usually the male, says to the female in these situations is, I'm going to leave you homeless, penniless, and childless. And so money is a huge part of that because a lot of women like you said, have been home, have given up their careers, have supported their husbands or partners through different academies and education. And then their ex will say, what's mine is mine and what's yours is mine too. And you don't deserve anything and you're not going to get it. And people get so terrified that they just believe it without actually going out and finding out their rights. And so it's really, really important to learn what your rights are and to learn how to stand up for yourself, sometimes for the first time in years.
And I know that it's easier said than done to say, stand up for yourself, right? If you've never stood up for yourself, it's a process. And that's why having support from someone like a divorce coach like Lisa and Chris, or tons of other great divorce coaches out there, I'm sure. But I found that divorce coaches are a really great starting point to start finding your voice, learning some of your rights, and learning tactics and techniques for standing up for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because just like therapists, divorce coaches have their own personalities and their own specialties. And because Chris and I only deal with the extremely high conflict cases, we have this hashtag called From Puddle to Ninja, because often we meet people and they are an absolute mess. They are terrified. They feel like they're going to get in trouble for anything they do. They're blamed for everything, and they're paralyzed because they're so frightened of the court system and their ex. And so a lot of times there's this sense of like, I just want to give up. I just want to get it done. And that's where they lose out because they feel like they don't have the courage to stand up and think, if I educate myself and spend a little time and build some confidence, I'm going to do way better, which of course is going to have ripple effects. It's going to affect our children and the next generation of like being a role model for somebody who says, no, I'm not going to just give in.
Well, education to me is certainly the first most important thing because if you don't understand the divorce process, if you don't understand some of the really critical divorce laws in your state, that's very intimidating. So I'm a huge fan of starting with learning about the process, learning what you're in for and what your rights are. So, Lisa, I want to start by talking about high conflict divorce and legal abuse. And so, So some people have one or the other, some people have both. Let's start with what high conflict divorce really is.
Okay, so in normal divorce, everybody's angry. At the beginning, everybody's angry. It shows in many ways, and there's no way to tell sometimes if something is high conflict right from the very beginning. So, but the thing is, and this is one of the factors that we use to indicate whether something is high conflict divorce or not, is anger that does not subside. So ours are the clients who years have passed and their ex is still as angry as ever. Even when they find a new partner, they're not interested in moving on with their lives. They're interested in punishing their ex for the failure of the relationship. We know that they often can't take accountability. A lot of times a relationship ends and there's reasons for that. And, both people are responsible to some extent. And obviously, I'm not talking about domestic violence, but people can say, all right, I made some mistakes. You probably made more than me, but whatever. And we're gonna sort of forgive, not forgive, but sort of like settle down, and we each want to just go on. That doesn't happen. Often our clients' exes feel a tremendous sense of abandonment, which triggers uh, a sense of failure that they can't confront. They can't take responsibility for whatever they might have done wrong. So then it turns into this splitting where it's like, I am the victim and you're the villain. And so obviously the ex is the one saying that they're the victim. And what they want to do is prove to the world how they didn't do anything wrong and it's all you, and they will scorch the earth to do everything possible. They don't care how much money it costs. They don't care how long it takes. And they don't care, unfortunately, how it affects the children, because they just want to have this image that they're right and you're wrong and you're going to suffer for it.
So, what are some of the really typical things that happen in a high conflict divorce?
Okay. I mean, starting from the beginning, I think there's always a power imbalance. So I think at the beginning, the person who has more power will try to convince the other person that they're right, and that moving forward in the divorce, that the other person, I'll just say our client, should listen to them. So it immediately starts with, like, you know what, let's not use the lawyer. Let's save money. Now, amicable, that's wonderful. But
Right.
when there's domestic violence and someone's like, let's not use a lawyer, like, you know me, I'm going to be a good person, that puts you at a major disadvantage because, again, you don't know your rights. And that often seeps into our clients' heads where they're just like, well, my husband or my wife or whoever is saying these things to me and I believe them because I believe them throughout the relationship. And it's hard sometimes to separate and say, this person is not my ally. I need to find people to advocate for me and my rights. And go ahead, Tracy.
Well, let me tell you, even when you do have one of those amicable divorces where you think you can do it without attorneys, I still recommend to clients that you do retain your own attorney on a limited basis just to review some of the agreements that you've come to help you as sort of that outside disinterested party who can say, this doesn't sound really fair to you. Have you considered all the implications of it? I'm thinking of A, B, and C that could happen down the road, and you might not be protected. Let's talk about that. So, even in amicable situations, I say having your own attorney can really be a benefit to you, even if you're only using them in a limited capacity.
Right. I mean, amicable also, what we want for everybody is to try to get everything done outside of court. It's
Sure.
cheaper, it's faster, you have a lot more control over your future when you're making decisions and it's not strangers making decisions, especially about your money and your children. Um, so yeah, so absolutely, we always say, even if you're pro se, you need to have legal assistance, financial experts, people in the background. Again, it comes back to you understanding your rights and what you're entitled to, so that that other person's voice isn't telling you what you don't deserve, because that's really the dynamic that's been in the relationship, and it has to stop. So also, what happens? So besides first trying to get you to not learn your rights, they'll often delay. Well, let me back up. Before the delays, they'll try to convince you that there's hope to keep the relationship together. And so, a lot of times people will be like, women in particular will be having conversations with their friends about like what we can do to maybe stay together and make it work. And then the other side will be having conversations about strategy to try to hide money or do what they can to get the best outcome. So again, it is important to really make sure that when there's a separation, you're on your own in terms of like your ex is not your ally, and you have to start finding people like a team of support to really educate you. Before, when you were talking about education, I was like, I grabbed this button off the wall that I had since my high school teaching days that says, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance, because
Right.
it is ignorance is very, very expensive.
Well, and
So
I think it's so important, you bring up creating hope that the relationship could work out. What I see with my clients is this is a kind of tactic that is used to potentially delay and stall the divorce. But while that is happening in the background, your ex is moving money, making plans, angling with the children and custody issues. And so you have to be really, really cautious of that.
yeah, I mean, the delays, that was the next step that I was going to talk about as well. Delays are so expensive. Chasing after discovery, which is when you're asking for information so that you can divide the assets in particular, that is the our clients' exes are notorious for not complying with discovery, and you're going after subpoenas, and you're trying to get information, and how are you supposed to move forward when you don't have the facts? And that's the thing that often wears our people down, and they'll say like, "I just you know what? It doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter. Just take it. I just want this to stop." And that's a huge mistake. The other thing that I think, has to be you have to keep an eye on is if someone is an addict. In our community, our clients are often dealing with people who have addictions and or mental health issues. And so often during divorce, a lawyer in particular is trained in logic. And so they'll come to the table thinking, "Okay, we're gonna do what's fair. Like, everyone's gonna do what's fair, and everyone's gonna do what's best for the kids." But that's not true when you're dealing with an addict or somebody with a personality disorder, because they're very me-centric. And so those cases have to be approached differently. And when someone has one of those issues, they can't even make decisions in their own best interests because their judgment is impaired. And it's really hard to go through trying to divorce somebody or dealing with a custody issue with someone who thinks short term, who doesn't think about the consequences, who's just trying to destroy everything to punish you. It is really different than normal divorce. And often our community feels very isolated because they feel like, how come mine isn't like everyone else's? So high conflict divorce is very different. I mean, remember at the beginning, everyone is angry. High conflict lasts a lot longer, and it goes not just through the divorce, but the co-parenting relationship.
So then if you have the high conflict divorce, then you can get into the area of legal abuse. Tell us what legal abuse is.
Okay. So legal abuse, there's different words for it that are very colorful. So legal abuse, we also call it litigation abuse, paper abuse, because so many things are filed and that costs lots of money. It's also called judicial terrorism. And my favorite is stalking through the court. We say that
Wow.
once you get out of the relationship, your ex is limited to three ways to still get at you: money, kids, and the court. And the court and money, like I said, go hand in hand. So they use the court to still engage with you. And there's generally two ways they do it. One is called frivolous litigation, and that's where they will file all kinds of motions threatening to reduce your support, threatening to change custody and take the kids away from you, of course, to punish you. And so you're constantly forced to go back to court, which is extremely traumatizing on so many levels. And you have to pay usually a lawyer to help you. And it's just like you can't focus on work, you can't focus on parenting. It becomes all consuming, just constantly addressing these issues. We talk about something we call the Friday night bomb, and that's that the other side. This is something we made up. It's not like a real term, but it's when the other side will file a motion right before a weekend or right before a special occasion or before a vacation just to ruin it for you, because of course you're going to be awfulizing and thinking about nothing else except, "Oh my God, what am I going to do when it's Monday or when we get back from this trip?" So again, it just destroys your life. unless you get support. The other side is what I lived through for years and years, which my lawyer told me the day we got divorced, like, not me and my lawyer, my ex, obviously, but that it took a full year. And he said, your ex is not going to comply with this agreement and you're going to be back in court and be ready for it. And you can't afford me anymore because you've already spent $100,000. So start laying down the paper trail to do it yourself. And then I spent the next 9 years or so in court dealing with that. So that's the other side of frivolous litigation, is where our someone like me or our clients is forced to constantly go to court to enforce an order or an agreement, and the delays and the just continuances and all kinds of nonsense, where again it's the same thing. It takes away from your life, it takes away from your parenting. You're living with this constant sense of dread, and how am I going to afford this? Or if I'm pro se, like, what's next? And constantly like swatting off more flies, and it's just really, really scary.
Yeah, especially if you've never been involved in the legal system before, court is all new to you. You're thinking about how much you have set aside for a divorce attorney, not realizing that you are going to run through that money so fast if you're being legally abused. It's a lot to take on. So, how can people avoid being a victim of legal abuse? I know you can't control what your ex does, okay? They're gonna file 30 motions, but what can you on the other side do to protect yourself and to minimize the damage to yourself?
Okay, so one of the things that we talk about is this umbrella term called taking strategic oversight of your case. And basically, first realizing that you've been in a coercively controlled relationship, probably if you're one of ours, where there's been this power imbalance and you've kind of seen the other person as authority for so long. And so you want to be very careful that when you choose your attorney, you don't repeat that same dynamic by hiring someone and being like, you know what? I have this attorney, they're going to take care of everything for me. High conflict cases are very detailed and complex, and lawyers get fatigued by them. So, taking strategic oversight is basically running your case like a business and realizing that you're going to need a number of different resources to help you, and you want to spend your money smartly. We always talk about this series that we've done with a Canadian attorney named David Morneau called The Client as Consumer, that you're the one paying the bills, you have choices, and that just because you've hired an attorney doesn't mean that if something feels wrong that you just have to do it because they're saying it. You have to learn to sort of put on your big girl or big boy pants and be like, I have to pay more attention. I cannot just think that someone's going to save my life. I have to really look at everything that I'm signing. I have to be aware of every motion that's on the docket. I have to be conscious that every 6 minutes my lawyer is billing me. So if I have a question, do I need to call my lawyer right away, or can I possibly get the answer from someone else? And I'm not talking about your friends and family. So, there's all kinds of ways you need to sort of realize that your case is not going to be like everyone else, where they hire the lawyer and the lawyer deals with it and that's the end of it. Like, you need to be an active, collaborative part of it. And I think that's really hard for people to understand at the very beginning. Next is choosing the right attorney. That's a big deal. You're going to have an intimate relationship with your attorney if you're like us, because this case is going to probably go on for a while. And you want to make sure that you choose someone who understands how to deal with a very difficult person in the legal system and cares about you as a human being and has fair billing practices and helps you, like my lawyer did, figure out ways to save money and cut costs. And one thing that my lawyer did that we always tell our clients to do as the other side starts filing lots of stuff and sending emails to your lawyer, which you're paying for because you're paying for your lawyer to read everything from opposing counsel, is you want to say, if it's not like something really serious, can you please just not read it and send it to me and I'll deal with it myself? And then you get support dealing with those emails, because that's where the money gets spent, is the constant communication between your ex's attorney and your lawyer, if you have lawyers, or, various ways that they end up running up the bills.
So, choosing the right attorney and doing the strategic oversight, I think, are amazing tips. I've worked in divorce for a really long time, and you're absolutely correct on those. But I think someone listening to this is saying, I've never been in court before. How on earth would I be able to be the person strategically looking after my own case?
Okay, so of course, like I said, you're going to need a team of support. Most people have never been in court before. It's terrifying. Even just walking into the courthouse is really scary. And then you're dealing with your ex uh, in the hallways, not just in the courtroom. So that's why that team of support is so important. And we talk about it. Chris came up with this, my partner, where it's like a table, and the more you're the surface of the table, and the legs that you need are different resources to support you. So, friends and family, a lot of our clients have unfortunately been isolated from friends and family, or they come from toxic families of origin. But even if you're lucky enough to have friends and family, they love you and they care about you, but they don't quite understand. And sometimes they might be what's called negative advocates, where they'll be like, you deserve this and you should do this. And it ends up like contributing to the conflict, which is not
Yes.
helpful. But that is part of your team if you do have friends and family, because sometimes they could be super helpful and supportive. That's one leg. Another is obviously your attorney. So your attorney's job is to be your ally and your advocate and to translate your case into to law. But they are not your emotional support. And I made that mistake, and many of us make that mistake where our lawyer knows everything and we're like, I need to call them. Like I need to call them about everything and see if it's okay. But many questions are not legal. They're just clarification, and that's something that other people can help with. The third leg is a therapist. And for our community, you absolutely need some type of therapy or support group, or working with a domestic violence advocate or domestic violence center, because they're working on helping you heal and move forward. But unfortunately, they don't understand legal abuse. And we've trained teams of therapists who are just like, what? Like, how could that be? And how does that happen? And sometimes they give you bad advice, especially when it comes to communication, because they're just focused on you getting better. But when you're in a custody battle in particular, you cannot gray rock. You can't just like move over the state lines with your child because your therapist thinks it's best for you. And we've met people who have done things like that and had awful things happen. So therapist is helpful, but not everything. And then another leg besides financial, Tracy, of course, is people like Chris and I'm high conflict divorce strategists, because we kind of fill the gaps of what attorneys are not trained to do and therapists don't quite understand. I'm a domestic violence advocate, so we do a lot of hand holding, but we also do tons of strategizing. And then we have this weekly legal abuse support group where I always say, do the strange thing of combining our male and female clients, but it is like really, really fascinating and helpful. And it's lovely to see them support each other. But in the group, we strategize, but we deal with the bigger issues of like, how are my kids going to be okay with a parent like that? And how do I co-parent with a very difficult ex? And so it's important, like we do so much with communication strategies, and that can be really effective. And we'll talk about what we're doing with our communication course, but I think that strategic communication is one of the most helpful things you can do in terms of building your case, saving money, and turning the volume down on legal abuse.
Well, I think the two most important professionals, if you could only choose two in your divorce, you need a good attorney and you need a good divorce coach. And for both of those, you need someone who has experience with the kind of issues that you have in your divorce. And I'm a big advocate for interviewing at least three attorneys, interviewing at least three divorce coaches to find out what is their background and their expertise. And how are they reacting to the issues that you have in your case? And then do they seem like they know what they're talking about? And do you think you could work well with them? And I don't think you can know that if you only interview one person.
Right, right. I mean, yeah, I mean, you're gonna have an intimate relationship with your divorce coach, maybe. You should more so than your attorney, because they're a lot cheaper generally. But yeah, like I said earlier, everyone has different backgrounds, and also people are at different stages emotionally. We've heard of a number of divorce coaches who have had terrible results in court in the past and are still very triggered. So it's like a lot of people want to be advocates, but you really have to do a lot of work on yourself, I think, before you start coaching other people, because we've heard from some of our clients that they interviewed other people who were like getting really upset and sort of fanning the flames of how courts need to change and the system needs that. Like you can't really do anything about that. For me, it's more like, what are some practical strategies we can use to work within the system? And
Right.
And we've found a lot of effective ways to do that. Like, yeah, the system's not perfect, but there's so many things you can do yourself.
Okay, so you're going to take the reins on strategy in your case. You're going to get the right attorney to help you, and you're going to be very mindful of how much you're using them and what you're using them for. Do you have a couple other tips on strategies to counteract legal abuse if you think you're being a victim of that?
Yeah. So I think about this thing that happened to me years ago. I call it the $9,000 mistake. And it was my ex and I were doing depositions, and that's where the lawyer, you're not in court, but your lawyer is asking your ex a number of questions that can be used on the record in terms of evidence that might come out later in court. So it's very serious and it's expensive, and you have to hire a stenographer to type up the whole thing because it becomes like part of your case. And so my ex and his attorney appeared at my lawyer's office with like a suitcase full of about 73 folders. And my ex sat there. His lawyer took at the folders, which were just, she made three big piles. My lawyer took a picture because he was like, oh my God. And then she pulled all of the folders out. So it just was three huge piles of paper. And so when my lawyer started questioning my ex, he was like, I don't know. And he started shuffling through papers. And so we were on the clock, and my lawyer said, this is crazy. Like, we can't continue. He had two people in his office spend hours sorting through my ex's papers, and I paid for it. It was insane. So now, like, things like that, being conscious of like, time is ticking. I'm paying for stuff. You really would have never do something like that. Had I known then what I know now, I would have been like, "We're canceling this deposition." And I probably would have asked for some kind of, compensation for them doing that, and only now do I realize that was a specific strategy to burn up my financial resources. So you wanna be very, very conscious. Like I said, lawyers bill every 6 minutes. If you have questions for your attorney, if you have legal questions, put them on a little pad, and when you meet in court, unless it's urgent, you're already paying for the time to sit with them on the benches outside. Go through your questions. So that's a way to save money because you're already paying for it at the same time. My lawyer used to also do this thing. He was fantastic with finding ways to save me money, where he would schedule our appearances on days when he had other clients in court, and then he would divide his time between us so that my billable rate was a lot less. So I don't know how many other attorneys do things like that, but that really, really helped.
I love that. So you've got a new course, I understand, and it's called How to Communicate with Your Ex Without Destroying Your Case or Losing Your Mind. What is it about?
Okay, so I mentioned strategic communication. And Tracy, I think you know this. I'm not sure if you know, though, but my background is in education. My master's is in education, and I was a high school English teacher. I taught writing. I'm a professional writer, and I love brainstorming ideas. And I'm so thrilled to, not that I wish that this had happened to me and I ended up here, but I'm so thrilled that I got this awesome education in the trenches, and now I can use my training as well as my experience to teach our clients how to communicate with really, really difficult people. So, how to communicate with your ex without destroying your case or losing your mind is basically a course. It's long. There's like 12 modules, but it really gets into what Chris and I call our FRAC model. It's a template, but it's an art form. It's not something you just use every single time. And it's been really, really effective in not only building the foundation for someone's case, not if they're back in court, but when they're back in court, because our clients are often almost always back in court, but also helps them turn hearsay into evidence. It protects them from false claims of parental alienation. And it, in particular, starts turning the power dynamic around. And what's really funny is that our clients tend to be, in general, like very highly educated professionals. We have lots of attorneys, we have lots of professors and mental health professionals. And sometimes the people who are writers themselves have the hardest time doing it because we have to slash their communication and say, like, you don't want to write these beautiful speeches and novels to your ex because you're feeding them. Like, they want the attention you're giving it to them. And it gives you targeted documentation that you can give to your lawyer, again, to save money. So you're not just throwing everything at the lawyer and being like, here, you figure out what I need for this.
Awesome. And you also have a free download that gives tips to help you if you're a victim of legal abuse. Tell us about that.
Yes. So, you know, Chris and I, like, sometimes when we come up with like an idea for something, It's like, okay, let's come up with 3 tips. Well, Chris came up with 18 and insisted that we have all 18. So there's 18 legal abuse tips, and there's like a little thing about what legal abuse is and what you can do about it. And then, of course, if you need more hand holding, as most people do, to definitely get in touch and do a free discovery call.
Yeah, I think that handout with the legal tips is a really great thing to pair with this interview because it's going to get it really concrete for you. So, we are going to put a link to that in the show notes. We're going to put a link to your course in the show notes. Lisa, it has been so great talking with you again. Thank you so much for sharing of your time and your expertise with us.
Always my pleasure. Thank you so much, Tracy.